The Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Paterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
All right, this is our open reading following our Laura Boss Poetry Foundation award reading. And I'm going to give two names at a time so that we don't have to have me coming up for every single person. So our first two readers are Joel, followed by Michael.
Hi, I'm Joel Lewis, and I always have a Paterson poem. I went to William Paterson and spent from the early 70s to about the mid 80s here all the time, and so it's kind of embedded. Taking the train up from Hoboken kind of brought back all these memories. And this is a Paterson poem, kind of set between today, the old days and the new days. It's called Genuine Imitation Life Gazette, which, if you're a music person, it's the one attempt by the Four Seasons Band to do a Sgt. Pepper's-like album. Believe it or not, this is look. And this is something that Four Seasons fans really didn't want. You know, it's Four Seasons doing a Sgt. Pepper's type band, type album. Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. My bus wheezes crossing the West Broadway Bridge like it just quit smoking, turning into the 1932-built Broadway terminal, complete with the original fixtures and the ghost sign on next door's building announcing, Orpheum, classy and refined burlesque, matinee every day. It seems maintained by the churlish gods of irony. I walk over to Van Houten Street, where the street's sunset air is redolent with muffler farts and Quay del Horno. I step inside the wobbly famous question mark bar, and some guy who looks like my dead friend Reardon is wearing a schmutzy New Eagles cap and is arguing with his ghost about the trouble with prog rock. He's not really wrong, just kind of loud. And me, I'm in a corner booth sipping a Boylan's Birch beer and sneaking a bite from a hot Texas wiener smuggled in from Libby's lunch just by the Great Falls. And when the bar's arthritic rockola offers up Gene Ammon's Jungle Strut, it reminds me that jazz once thrived in Silk City, the Joe Mooney Quartet at Sandy's bars in the 40s, and Thad Jones playing my request of A Child Is Born during the late set at the Three Sisters opposite the roiling Passaic River. I then walked down Chauncey Street towards Port Arthur Restaurant for the usual lonely plate of chicken my fun while thinking about the fates that set teenage Bob Gaudio, a founder of the Four Seasons, to take piano lessons with the cerebral Sal Mosca, the great disciple of the intensely austere Lenny Tristano. I keep pushing a spectral pantry pride cart full of value-free anecdotes and images of out-of-reach fancies while still hanging on to the hope that someone might mistake me for wisdom in a light blue poplin jacket.
Hi, I'm Michael Begnal. Nice to be here. I wasn't planning to read, but luckily I was able to find a couple of things online. So I'm going to read a poem called A Triplex Unity, which is sort of a fancy way of saying it's in 3 stanzas, each one sort of exploring a different aspect of the poet or poetry. So this is one of those poems about poetry, but I think it's actually necessary if we're serious poets to think about our art as necessary, or as Audre Lorde said in her famous essay, though I know she wasn't writing for me especially, that why is poetry not a luxury? All right, well, I don't know if this answers the question. No one could top Lord. But this one is called a triplex unity. The last word is fionn, which is the Irish version of Finn McCool. A triplex unity. They sink inward in order to return to the sorcery of poetry, the Finn word that in stillness illuminates the empty room, and then as prophets of boom, they emerge in feathered robes and now receive the druidic mantle, becoming the futuristic order of poets, the ancient line to all our todays. Is that the way to be institutional, even if when you are the institution? Instead, the blue-green shade of the rented hall where the people are gathered, poets among them, connected in a dialectic of making poems and speeches. In the glade, the gleam arises, steam around leaf, soundless, brightness broken, seeds awoken, sap from paps free to be tongued, now sung, never dead, whether deep within, weep wildly, fionn. Thank you.
Next will be Christine and then Jennifer.
This poem was in memory of my father. It's called Discernible. Did your father come home mornings after working the night shift at the county jail? Speak of the homeless that would commit petty crimes so they'd have a place to sleep in winter. Speak of the men who got a fire hose for a bath, hid things in places of the body you wouldn't believe. Did your father hold you up high on his shoulders to see the nightclub he bounced at so you could see the dance floor? Bring you home 45s from the bands you tried to hold up to the Rolling Stones or Joan Jett and the Blackhearts? Did your father fall asleep driving you back from a holiday at his mother's? Think the stoplights were stars or moons while we sang out stop, while we sang out go, while we sang out stay in the lines? Did your father find himself driving the family out on mischief night to scratch out in chalk on black asphalt in the rich neighborhood that his boss at the bank was a jerk for firing him? Did he? While your mother sat in the passenger seat protesting while his girls giggled in the back seat? Did he ever tell you that you could do anything you set your mind to, that you could earn your doctorate, that he would take a photo of you holding the hands of your children, husband by your side after you received that diploma, that he would blow up that photo so large that the 16 by 20 lost details was somewhat pixelated, that even went as far as to have the crowd around you photoshopped out? Did he know what I never told him, that it was all too much? Did he know that I finally dusted off the treasure covered in the attic, dust 3 years after he was gone, that I finally hung his trophy on the wall along each side of his grandchildren's baptisms, First Holy Communions? Thank you.
That was wonderful. I also have a daddy poem. Talk about twin poems, right? Let's see here. Daddy sang bass. The money evaporated after my parents' divorce. Halfway through sophomore year, my father drove me back from Boston to finish college in New Jersey. 7 hours in his Datsun. A crate of records and my stereo in the back seat. We sang along with the radio like we used to when I was little. The knob fixed on the oldies station that played only doo-wop. Cousin Brucey's picks. Who put the ram in the ram-a-llama ding-dong? Who put the dip in the dip-da-dip-da-dip? Singing was easier than conversation, better than silence. I would have preferred to hear the Pretenders, to forget how miserable I was now that my city was gone. I could have rebelled, but my father was behind the wheel. When the coasters belted out yakety-yak, he answered, "Don't talk back," and I didn't say a word.
Next to read will be Tammy and Francis.
Trigger points. Blistered and raw, this thumb sticks out like a flimsy promise under pressure. Its taut tendons are prone to injury from repetitive movements and overextension. I shove it inside my mouth like a piece of candy, something sweet lodged in my cheek, resting against my fuzzy, thick tongue. The tip is the best part to suck. Its sour, sweaty smell keeps me company for hours behind bars. A feast at the bottom of this crib where my mother left me. I play peekaboo with her shadow till it drifts so far the walls forget her shape. I curl up into myself, waiting for the hunger to ebb, but the salt on my skin tastes like grit and grief. Pity this thumb. I pray it won't break, or worse, fall off if it's no longer attached to my lips. Long before I discovered it's not a digit, long before I discovered it is a digit and not just my favorite finger. I can count on this thumb to prevail after it loses every wrestle. I trust it will stand up for me when my father sneers and points out every scar I carved into my wrist. No one will ever love you, he predicts, but my thumb can't reject me. It hails rides from dangerous men. Thank you.
Hi. My poem is called Migrant Mother, and it's in reference to the iconic figure that Dorothea Lange photographed. I saw an exhibit of photographs recently, that among them, and I was picturing what she would say to us from that photograph, and here's the poem. Her name, by the way, was Florence Owens Thompson, a name she remained unnamed for a very long time. Anyway, normally, I wouldn't talk to no strangers, but this lady had sincerity written all over her. The way she looked at me and the kids and that camera that hung around her neck seemed like another eye. I wasn't going to smile like some Hollywood star. And the two of my kids turned around so their faces wouldn't show. There was no way they wanted their picture taken. I wasn't that keen on being in the shot either, but didn't have the heart to turn away. What was the point? Let her have her picture. It wasn't only me she was taking. Maybe she believed it was America and my ancestors. I know she saw them in me and asked no questions, but carried my face across the nation. It claims the fame I never got or wanted. When I look at that picture in a book or on a wall somewhere, I think, yeah, that's me all right, waiting in that broken down truck for the men to come back and lead us to where something was growing, not dust swirling or crops dying in the field, someplace we could maybe settle in, a real home that wasn't on no wheels.
Hi, I'm Chris. Not that I didn't like baseball, but I just never had time or interest in it, and now I find myself deep in baseball. So for 7 years, I produced Yogi Berra Bards and Bats events for students and high school students. One year, I invited Joe Weil to come too, and. Okay. And but also now I'm entering into the there's a national baseball contest. I didn't think they would have the combination of the two, but there is. Here's one that I wrote for this year's baseball poetry contest, and it's called 8, but in Roman numerals. And the little subhead is called Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center, Bards and Bats, Baseball Poetry Festival, April 4th, 2004. Showing up before the hour, one can nearly taste the turf, tracing the evening's cold clack of cleats, summoning the last inning's tumult. Here at Yogi's History House, the past is now. In my monastic vows of attention, the aura of the crowd ascends for the pitch selection and the catcher spitting a single Cracker Jack shell to the ground. Beyond the lobby, uniformed mannequins quarrel silently for the number 8. Without umbrage, the face mask waits for a phrase to emerge from the mouth once behind it. It's déjà vu all over again. So we write it twice in quatrains to sustain the aura of it, stitching like a woven story in an old mitt.
I'm Terry Hall from Stanton, Virginia, and I thought I would share a poem from the manuscript I'm currently working on. This is called Salt Lick. When my husband walked out, my mama warned, take everything he tells you with a grain of salt. His here's why I'm leaving words, salt in my wounds, not a lick of truth. He twisted his ankle on an apple of discord, and too quickly I was tricked into gifting him his Helen. She, an Epsom soak he took and fled. So move on, my friends told me. Look forward, not back. If wiser, I'd have tossed him like salt off my shoulder. But in lingering longing, a swift look to my left, seeking out his eyes like the sea, like deceit. And like Lot's wife, I stiffened right there where I stood, turned pillar of salt, a mineral lick, solid phosphorus, sodium, calcium, zinc. They relentlessly kiss me, moose, fox, squirrel, and elk, till disarmed I am armless as the Venus and still thirsting for truth, phantom limbs forever curved in the lie of his crooked embrace.
Our next two readers will be Michelle and Dutch.
I've never read from my phone before, and this is a 2-column poem. So this is a form called a cleave poem, which is 2 columns and a line at the bottom, and it's read down 1 column, down the 2nd column, and then across as a single poem, and then the last line, and it's called Grandfathers. When his daughter asked him again after the silence what he could remember, he said he saw men hanging from trees. His sister would mention only the garden next to the house where they grew vegetables, tried to save enough for winter, never mention the mother or sister, the way that Jewish next of kin must shovel dirt onto their own. He never said where he was born. They just assumed it was New York, where he was castigated for playing ball. The form to send his son to college asked Poland. He was afraid it made him less American. He worked 7 days a week for more, never mentioned his own father, orphaned, walking across the border, who came here, the reason baseball had seemed a waste of time. When his daughter asked him, he never said where he was born. Again, after the silence, they just assumed it. What he could remember was New York. He said he saw men where he was castigated for playing ball hanging from trees. The form to send his son to college asked. His sister would mention only Poland. The garden next to the house, he was afraid it made him less American. Where they grew vegetables, he worked 7 days a week, tried to save enough for winter, for more. Never mentioned the mother, never mentioned his own father or sister, orphaned, walking across the border, the way that Jewish next of kin who came here must shovel dirt onto their own, the reason baseball had seemed a waste of time, the way their children became my parents, the way we still are shoveling the dirt.
In the course of my poetry life, I've directed 3 reading series, and twice I introduced Laura, and twice I introduced Maria, and the one that I directed at the Somerville Library, I always featured 2 poets, and on the night Laura was reading, I always waited a few minutes after start time, and she still hadn't shown up, so I had the other reader begin. And Laura finally showed up about 40 minutes after the reading started, and she said, "I knew there was a problem when I saw the sign, last exit in New Jersey." How she ever, she only had directions going one direction. How she ever got there at all after that, I don't know, but she did and gave her usual great reading. So this is a poem that I've used when I want to differentiate between prose and poetry. And for those who can see it, it kind of zigzags down the page, so each other line is justified to the opposite margin. So the prose version of this is: a friend came to visit and I wasn't home, and then I went to visit him, and he was. So that's prose. This is the poetry version. The sound itself. I still hear the hollow knocking I never heard, knuckles rapping upon my door, reverberates up and down the empty halls, dissipating, returning, no answer, echoing. I stand here at both ends of 2 years, 2 doors. The echo in between increases till the sound itself fills the air. This day, your door opens on the present, lets the echo escape.
Thanks, Ken. It's the only poem I found on my phone, so let me just get it in the right position so it's not gonna, wait a minute, I gotta get it to, hang on a second. There it is. I grew up in upstate New York in the country, so that's the environment location of this poem. Apologies to those who may have heard it recently. It's a love poem that I wrote for my father. It's called Anarchy. It's only in thinking about it that I remember my father always had a certain place for every little thing, and we always wondered why. Why do toothbrushes go into the holder with the bristles facing out? Why do the shoes get lined up, toes turned away from the underside of the bed? Why do we sleep with our heads pointing north? "It's anarchy," he said in a hush. "It's everywhere." So instead of feeling secure when the lights went out and I crawled under the covers, with my head pointing north, I stayed wide awake, my X-ray vision eyes piercing the darkness, looking for anarchy. I wondered if it, for surely anarchy was an it, not a he or a she, was circling our house and was making those loud noises we often heard, or if instead those cries came from stray dogs. I wondered if it was something loose in the barn across the road, and if it made the cows bellow. I wondered if anarchy was the car dealership he said he would get even with after he bought our second bad car in a row. I know because I heard him rumbling about bad design and the excesses of the labor movement when the hood flew off and ended up in a ditch as we were on our way to the drive-in one night. Maybe anarchy was the killer virus that the Russians put in Sputnik, and that even now was being released over North America while we were all supposed to be asleep. Later, when he came up to bed, to the room we all shared, and saw I was still awake, he said that next time he would leave the light on for me. I wasn't sure why that didn't make me feel better. Maybe I thought the killer virus would disappear in the light, and then I would never know if it was there or not. After he undressed in the darkness, after he heaved his weight onto his side of the coil spring bed he shared with my mother on the other side of the room, his head pointing north, and with his breathing slowing and me hearing familiar noises to let me know he was asleep, I thought that maybe anarchy was the baseball that came right at my head that day, and I ducked to get out of the way, but the umpire said I swung and called me out. Maybe anarchy is what I know now that I didn't know then. Maybe it's being in bed with my head pointing north, surrounded by the sounds we hear and those sounds we will never hear again. Thank you.
I'm going to close out with a poem of mine that I'm very happy to say Maria selected for what will be the last issue of the Paterson Literary Review that she edited. So thank you, Maria, for 4 decades and more of putting together the Poetry Center, and also for doing the Paterson Literary Review. We had a lot of dad poems and family poems, so this one is called Weekend with Dad, but I'm the dad in this one. Weekend with Dad. When we were leaving, you found the snakeskin on the desk near the computer. I told you I had found it in another place before you were born. Why don't people do that, you asked? And I thought, because people stretch and adapt to changes, then thought better of it. We all shed skins eventually, I said, and zipped up your jacket.